Good evening, everyone. I want to thank you all for joining us, spending your Halloween evening with us. And I want to thank so many divisions at the university, the Neil Burton Memorial Lecture Series, the Gender Studies Department, and all those of you that actually have made our travels and the last few days possible. My role tonight is actually a bit limited. Yesterday in the same room, Skaya and I shared some of our thoughts on and clips on Taiwan Indigenous women, the way that they're doing the work right now in the communities, as well as how they have been portrayed through media, film clips since the early 20th century. And at the end of the night, a suggestion came to us that it probably would be good to contextualize Taiwan Indigenous women to give everyone sort of a 101. So this is a very brief introduction to Taiwan Indigenous peoples, or history of Taiwan Indigenous peoples through Taiwan's history through Indigenous lens. So there are all different ways of calling Indigenous people First Nations of Taiwan. For an island that's just a little bit bigger than Vancouver Island, Taiwan is 36,000 square kilometers. Thank you. Thank you. And Vancouver Island is 31. Actually, quite to my surprise, this is really the size of Taiwan. Indigenous people constitutes about 2.4% of the total population. Although we know census is very problematic, especially when it comes to Indigenous peoples, because it's all about how one self-identifies or not. And compared to the population you have on Vancouver Island, we know that Taiwan is very populous. Here on the island, it's about 750,000 people. Taiwan has 23 million, and about 2 million of which actually live, work in China. And today, as of 2014, there's 16 officially recognized nations, peoples, and I would say in the lingua that I understand from the United States as a federally recognized tribes, they are. And these names, again, some of them extremely problematic, but this is what they're known. Amis people, Amis Pangcah, otherwise known Pangcah, which is what they call themselves. Atayal, Taiwan, Bunong, Rukai, Puyuma, Zhou, Sasiyak, Yami, Dao, Gavalan, Turugu, Sakizaya, Sidik, Halua, Ganaganavu. And my fellow speaker, my co-presenter, Skaya, is from Sidik Turugu people. So this is what Taiwan looks like. It's an island, like the one we're standing on, also indigenous land, and the map tells us roughly where they are located. But this is maps only tell very partial stories, so you get the idea. And as you can see, that they're heavily concentrated on the southeast coast of Taiwan, southeast area of Taiwan, which is mountainous, and the east coast of Taiwan is not our notion in the United States. The east coast. East coast is actually much less arable, very, very little arable land, and it is also mountainous. It's and often considered, using the word people, less urbanized, less. Another word people you would hear, less developed. Taiwan has gone through really a lot of colonial governments. So indigenous people have been there since time immemorial. Okay, so we're not talking about that. We're talking about the Taiwan, also known as Formosa. Sorry, misspelled Formosa. It's a Portuguese word. Literally means beautiful. So the story is that when Portuguese settlers, sailed through the globe, happened on Taiwan, this little island, lush little island, and just bursted out. Yeah, Formosa, beautiful island. That's what it is. They never stayed. The Spaniards did. The Spanish people did. This is part of the Western European expansion and rule over the world. So the Spaniards were in Taiwan and overlapping with the Dutch, and they ruled different parts of Taiwan. Then the Ming Dynasty loyalist, Zheng Chenggong or Gohinga, otherwise known, and then Qing Dynasty that also claims its hold control over Taiwan. The Japanese, Taiwan, very much like several other islands, Taiwan was ceded to Japan after the Sino-Japanese War in 1895. So Taiwan was ruled by the Japanese for 50 years, and those 50 years, in so many ways, is critical for actually critical to the way Taiwan indigenous social structures is today, because the Japanese started categorizing. They learned from the social sciences of the West to actually document, archive, and dividing the indigenous peoples according to the Sheng Fan and Shou Fan, meaning the savages that are either more developed or cooked. Actually, the word Shou Fan means they're more cooked or they are raw. So differentiations of the barbarians / savages. 1990. So as you see from this series, that the indigenous peoples of Taiwan had to learn different cultures and languages. So today you still find in some indigenous villages grandmothers, grandfathers that can only speak their indigenous language and Japanese. Some of them never got a chance to learn Mandarin or the other Sinophone languages. 1945, at the end of World War II, Taiwan was returned. That's the Chinese language, nationalist language, returned to China. And that's also marked the end of the Civil War in China. Chiang Kai-shek, Generalissimo in Taiwan, that we would like to consider dictator anyway, retreated, with his close to 1 million troops to Taiwan, and they continued pretty much the reign over the indigenous populations. So from 1945 until today, the nationalist government has gone through. Let me just say, I pause here only to say that Taiwan is still officially the Republic of China, but it's not the Republic of China during the Jiang's rule. And actually, after the lift of martial law in 1987, we actually have seen lots of movements come to fruition. Indigenous movements had already been underway. In 2005, Indigenous Peoples Basic Law got passed. This is way before the United Nations, the Declaration of indigenous people's human rights that actually got passed in September 2007. So Taiwan, a lot of people like to talk about this probably, that Taiwan's legislature for indigenous people actually went ahead of United Nations. Then in 2016, Taiwan elected its second Democratic Progressive Party candidate to become president, Tsai Ing-wen. Dr. Tsai Ing-wen, I mentioned quickly last night, is the first woman president of Taiwan, has a PhD in law from London School of Economics, and who was a professor of law for 16 years before she participated in politics. One of the first things that she did was issuing an apology to the indigenous peoples. She came to office in May 2017, correct? 2016, sorry, 2016, May 2016. August 1st, she issued the official apology. And I'm just going to play 2 minutes and stop here, and then Skaya will continue. This is not playing. You know what? You get the idea. And thanks to Gordon, we actually have some Halloween candy. So I think as Skaya get ready, we would like to share some festivity. And really, there's no better way to celebrate Halloween than actually sitting down here for a good session of understanding the revitalization of indigenous knowledge and challenges in contemporary Taiwan through 3 documentary filmmakers. So thank you. I'll just pass around the candy. When we have a chance, I'll come back with this. Thank you.
Thank you for everyone who can come during this Halloween festival. And thank you for Helen and Joanne for organization. And also I would like to thank you for Tricia for this wonderful introduction, so that you might have a brief understanding about Taiwanese history. So first, I think I will only do a brief presentation about my film. Then we start to first see the film. Then I will update some information about all these 3 documentary filmmakers. So these 3 documentary filmmakers is Mayaw Biho, Pilin Yapu, and Chang Shu-Lan. They are all from 3 different communities, Amis, Atayal, and Da'u. They are the first generation indigenous filmmakers. Yesterday we have a subject about how the representation of indigenous women in the history of Taiwan indigenous film. And yesterday we did run through the films, especially colonial propaganda films and commercial films, who is made by Japanese and also Han Taiwanese. So today we will have the opportunity to see the film auto representation or auto ethnographic film about these 3 documentary filmmakers. And this one actually I'm doing the shooting around 2010 to 2011, where I do my field studies with these 3 filmmakers, and I finished the editing on 2013. Yeah, so there are some several years ago, and there's some changes. And indigenous filmmakers, they start to create films around 1990s. So I will let them talk about how they start their filmmaking career. We will see, and we'll talk more later. Thank you. Probably, since Tricia suggests me, we start from several questions, then I will introduce you more for update their news. Okay. Is there some questions? Okay, please. Could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Yi-Chun from the Department of Asian Studies in UVic, this university. My first question is, I noticed that you used the English word, in the English version you used Tao. I didn't quite understand why you used this word. So can you explain this to represent the original or the indigenous or others?
It's Tao, their name. Tao people.
The simple.
Yes.
Okay.
Tao, but they pronounce Tao.
Oh, Tao. I cannot.
It's like Taoism. Yes.
Sorry. Okay, thank you. Okay.
You're welcome. Okay, please.
This is a very special topic, and
Yeah, one moment. Probably we'll get the microphone for the registry.
I can
It's in
talk
the cabinet,
loudly.
Yeah.
We have to push
Okay.
it farther.
You deal with the role of the director
Mm-hmm.
in this dealing with this very special topic. Is it important to include what the indigenous peoples want you to show to the audience outside, who is probably ignorant of the topic? The role of the director
Mm-hmm.
is consulting with the subjects, not very important, and getting their wishes onto the film.
I'm not quite understand this question. Could you explain it more precisely?
Did you talk to the people before you filmed
Mm-hmm.
and ask them what they wanted you to show?
Oh, no, I didn't do it. But since this film, I do it with my PhD dissertation. And the title of my dissertation is 12 Endogenous Ethical Inquiries. So for me, at that moment, I wanted to know how the indigenous filmmakers they cooperate with the community while they film. Because my master degree, I do it in cinema in Paris. And at the moment, I see through all the different type of film in Taiwan indigenous film history. So at the moment, it was only analyzing the film and the meanings. But before cinema study, I major in political science. And in political science, we always talk about the invisible hands. So after that master degree, I want to know more about those invisible hands. Such as yesterday, we show some film about propaganda film. So there are a lot of political intention while they doing their film. They make indigenous character in the use of their colonial purpose. So I wanted to know if while the indigenous peoples, they have the opportunity to take the camera recorder, what they would like to show. So that's how I start my PhD studies. And then little by little, while I interview them and I accompany with them for their during their shooting, I found that they don't really use a lot of the camera. Most of the time, they just stay with the community members, and they, like for example, Mayaw Biho, he is like a political activist. So most of the time, he's doing protest, then filming. And Pilin Yapu, actually he's a local educator. He's a principal of an indigenous elementary school. So most of the time he trying to find his way to adapt Atayal's culture into the educational system. And Chang Shu-Lan, she is a local nurse. So she trying to figure out how to adapt modern medical, but into the Tao's way of thinking. So I finally realized for them, filmmaking is not the purpose itself. Actually, it's a way that they can understand and they can learn their culture, and at the same time to show to the others, to arouse more public attention on what they're working with.
Thank you. That
You're
helps
welcome.
a lot.
Thank you. Okay, please.
Skaya, did you have any trouble convincing the 3 directors to participate in your documentary?
Not really, because I stay with them for quite a long time, mostly with Mayaw Biho, because he is the full-time director, and Pilin and Siapusukanan, they have their official work, so I cannot stay all the time with them. So most of the time I stay with Mayaw Biho, and at that moment it was during a shooting in Namasha. There will be the film that tomorrow we will show with Tricia. Namasha is a tribe where the Gana people they live. Is the latest people who is recognized by the government, and their total population is around 600. So a very few small population. There was during 2009 there is a huge typhoon, and Namasha is the most damaged place by the typhoon. So at that moment they haven't recognized yet by the government, but their living environment is completely destroyed by the natural disasters. And at that moment, the government, they want to take this chance to let them move out the territory. So they use a policy which called a pre-construction house. It's not in the mountain, it's on the city side. They told them, tell all the senators, if you can come down the mountains and we will give you the house for free. So at that moment, this community, it's become a little bit separate because some people they afraid if someday typhoon comes again, probably they can no longer live there. So they decided to move down, and a part of that they don't want to leave their traditional land because they've already been in the hundreds of years been relocated again and again by different regions. So they know if they leave their land, they will lose their way of thinking, way of life, and their identity. So it was in the very difficult moment that the Gana people they are facing the 人造的灾难。
Right. So right after typhoon or our equivalent here of hurricane, what they have to confront the another disaster fabricated by the colonial government policies.
So it's one side natural disaster, and the other side is a human disaster. And at the moment, since it's the post typhoon period, there are a lot of suicide. So we were facing a very complicated and dedicated situation. And I found that moment, Mayaw Biho doesn't often use his camcorder. Most of his time, he just stay with them, talk to them, and eat with them, just stay aside. Actually, he was not his initiative to come to this village. Actually, it's Abu. Abu is the one feminist, one Ganagamu feminist. She asked Mayaw to come because he is the most productive documentary filmmaker in the indigenous community. So even though there are different group ethnic, but Abu think in this very moment they really need someone to recall their history. And I think probably a part of the thanks to this filmmaking process, he done at least three films about this community, and in several years later, this group of people has finally recognized by the government, and they rebuilt their community, even though certain people still live in the urban area, but little by little, by re-establish their ritual ceremony, which you saw on the screen, is the river worship of the river. They reunion their identity. And actually tomorrow, I think Tricia might talk, there are a lot of involvement and engagement from local women activists.
Right. Tomorrow the documentary screened will be Mayaw Biho's, one of his pieces on this community in Kaohsiung, Namasha. And last night we did I did briefly mention Abu Ganaviana's work. So tomorrow we will have more time to share with you the latest. It's actually very exciting.
Yeah. Okay. So please.
Well, may I ask you, when you talk about bringing this to the public attention, who are the audience in Taiwan, or who you're able to get into the urban settings, and who will see these documentary films that are made?
Yeah, actually, it depends. For my film, for the moment, I didn't really show a lot of place. It's because I just came back to Taiwan since last November, and whole this year I curating Indigenous Film Day in France for 2 times. So I seldom have time for promoting my own documentary film. I try to bring more indigenous film and directors and scholars to the international platform. So I kind of have different role for the moment. Yeah, but for those 3 filmmakers, I can. It's a chance I can also talk about my. It's not mine. Where is the? Okay. Here, lecture 3. Okay. So actually, these 3 filmmakers, they have self-organized film screening. For example, Mayaw Biho, he found the real Pangcah Film Festival, so that all the films about Pangcah people can see in a film festival. And for example, Pilin Yapu, I was first. Pilin Yapu, he done 64 self-screening debates in 8 different Atayal tribe for his film Go Close to Ancestor Spirit, in order to arouse the Atayal inhabitants to think of their ceremony, what kind of ceremony they would like to restore, because some of the tribe their ceremony become very touristic, and some of them are a little bit Japanese because of the colonial history, and some of them they were kind of prohibited by their Christianity beliefs. But in Pilin Yapu's tribe, Mayaw Biho tribe that you saw on the film, has remained their Maho ceremony since Japanese period. It was before 1945. So never stop. So he would like to dialogue with different Atayal villages to pay attention on the revitalization of the traditional ceremonies. Yeah, and for Siabu Sokanen, as you can, she just speak a little bit about her screening in Dao tribe, because she found that as a local nurse herself in Lanyu, she had to care about 40 elder herself. It was too difficult, and she needed more help from neighbors. So she tried to film their elders' situation, and then doing his film screening around the island, Lanyu Island, to recall more participation. And here I want to explain a little bit, because for the Dao people, they have the taboo. They think the people, if they are Yunis or they are going to facing the death, they are the people. They have anito on them. It's the evil spirits. So in the old days, Dao people, they will avoid to close to all these kind of person. So mostly they are elders. So even the elders, they prefer not to condemn their evil spirit to their families. So they live alone in a very in an abandoned house, waiting to die, because it was in 1997, around 1970s, while 1990s, while Siya Sukanan finished her nurse school, she came back to Lanyu. She saw that some of the elders, actually their illness is not that serious. They can receive medical treatment, then get recovered. But nobody seems to understand that, and she need more help. But at that moment, since this Anito culture, so that she has been criticized by a lot of Dao neighbors. So that's how actually her film is not allowed to showing in Lanyu. But at the moment, around 2000, she also doing her screening in Taiwan, around tour of Taiwan, and which helped her to receive a lot of donation in order to fund her first association is Lanyu Home Care Association in 1999. So the audience, they are not the original theater audience. There are some specific audience, like in a school or in some non-profit area. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So, some other questions?
Personally, I found it extraordinarily moving. It's hard not to break down several moments. But what I find very interesting is that Siya Kanan herself often uses the camera as you interview her, and different from our two other documentary filmmakers, Mayaw Biho and Pilin. They sit and let you interview, but she keeps capturing you. I find that interesting.
Yeah, that's also why I cut so many sequences about she shooting me on the screen. I think probably it's because you just saw on the film, Lanyu people has been a long-term stereotype by the non-Dao people on the screen. So for me, I think her action is because camera make her feel safe. She record me to protect herself, and I think it's nice because while I shoot her, she also we are equal.
Right.
I'm not superior than her because I have a camera recorder. So I like that reaction.
Yeah, just following on that question, after this research, could you say that there is a gender difference in Indigenous filmmaking? And the second question is, have you identified an Indigenous feminist perspective on filmmaking in your research? And what is that?
Well, actually, three of these filmmakers, they have made indigenous women on their films' main characters, such as Mayaw Biho. Tomorrow he will has a film about an indigenous feminist. Actually, it's quite weird to say, but I found in all these indigenous filmmakers, women or men, they are
Very feminist.
their action are feminist, but in their hand, in their mind, they don't have the awareness that it is feminist. Is feminism. They respect each other, while man or woman. So I think probably is a subject after I have all this feedback. I will keep on searching.
Some of the film shows and portrays some ethical issues about filming indigenous people, right? You can see there some ethical issues. They are raising some ethical issues on how you film indigenous people. And I wonder, since they have been showing these films in communities, is something have changed? Some of those practices have changed in some way.
Yeah, there are a lot. For example, for Siku Sokanen's case, she finally have found her association, and then since now almost 20 years. So the idea of Anito, or the idea of take care the elders of the others, it became possible, because beforehand the Dao people, they think if somebody come here to take care of my my grandfather or my parents, which means I didn't well treat our elders well, so that somebody might come here to help us. But Siku Sokanen, her association, she kind of changed these ideas. She make her home care service like an external 就是额外的 supply， 额外的辅助。
So what she has done is that not to make her organizations like the authority taking care of the family, rather she's posing their service as supplementary, additional to the family's help.
So that they can help each other. That's one change for Siku Sokanen's case, and the other for Pilin Yapu's case. While he self-organized 60s film screening in Atayal tribe, which really changed the idea about how they revitalize the ceremonies. So some of them, they start to aware that their ceremony are sometimes too touristic or too dominated by the local government, etc. So which make change. And Mayaw Biho, actually, he's making a lot of film and encourage a lot of participation from indigenous youth or non-indigenous youth. For example, he has a lot of subject about film name ratification. The indigenous people return their traditional name. For example, me, while I was younger, I also saw his film, and which already given me the ideas to take back my own traditional name. And it was little by little I start to collaborate with him. At that moment I became journalist. I collaborate with him, and with this influence, I finally changed my name to the traditional one since 2006. Yeah. So there are a lot of encouragement from their film. Okay, please.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about the status of indigenous languages on Taiwan?
The status. Actually, since Tricia has told that the president had done her official apologies on 2016, and recently she just announced indigenous languages as official language in Taiwan. So now her indigenous policies are very focused on the language policies. Because she can hardly respond to the land claims. But since she is the first person who do the official apologies, so she needs some to prove her progress. And she really make a lot of progress in education and in language learning. Now they encourage more and more local inhabitants to pass the examination to get the certificate to become language teachers.
Can I? I would just like to share some observations because I spent about 6 months this past spring as a Fullbright scholar. Got to observe the process of what I would call mainstreaming of indigenous languages in Taiwan. And as you can imagine, many groups have lost a good part of the language. So that one good thing that has come out of it that I'm witnessing is that they're realizing elders, the values of elders, that they're still the language keepers, the tradition holders. So it is ongoing, it's unfolding. It will be interesting to see how this is going to what it's going to look like, say, in 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Skaya, what would you like Han Chinese overseas, like myself, to learn from the work that you're doing, the stories of indigenous filmmakers and their work? What do you want us to take away?
It's like the Mayaw Biho's ongoing movement. No one is an outsider. So indigenous culture, indigenous life, indigenous language matters. That's what I would like to show through all these speeches and films. So do we have a time to update a little bit what they done? Okay. So here you see the first picture. This one I took it in a protest in last year, August 1st. It was the 1 year after President Tsai's official apologies. The August 1st is Taiwan Indigenous Day. This is because to memorize the day that indigenous people's official term has been put into the constitutional law in 1990s. So they made this day Taiwan Indigenous Day. So that's why the president, she chose this day to do her official apologies. But after these official apologies, actually the Council of Indigenous Peoples, they have announced an act which abuse indigenous land rights. So start from the February 23rd last year, the Mayaw Biho and two singers who is Banai and Nabu, they start to do their occupied movement in front of the presidential office buildings, palace. And they have they stay there till now more than 600 days. And at that moment, it was August last year, I stayed with them around 30 days, live in their occupation tent. So that's when we go to this Indigenous Day where President Tsai is in a building, do her official speech to say how her done the progress for indigenous language policies. And we were outside to protest. Yeah, okay. Here. So I'll update this. We call that Indigenous Keita Boulevard protest. Their slogan is "Nobody is an outsider," and they were during 100 days. They were in front of the presidential palace, but it's too obvious too confusing probably for the authorities. So the police has demolished their first camp, and there through the Facebook we can see the moment of the demolition. Okay. I need to log in.
I think we do.
Okay.
And significantly, the new just share with you what Skaya is signing in. The new occupied site is inside the 228 Memorial Park. It's commemorating a genocide happening in Taiwan by the nationalist government. But for the longest time, this park is so layered. This park was actually the most important LGBTQ gathering and solidarity park. And that's where they are today. If you should have a chance stopping by Taiwan, definitely, take a ride down there. They are there, day and night.
Oh, it works. They asked too many questions, isn't it? Okay.
Making sure it's from you, Skaya.
Can we just? Okay, we can. And then of long, so I go to. There are around 300 policies against 10 activists. And Mayaw is the person who filmed all these demolition.
Demonstration. No, demolition.
Demolition. And since he is the one who has the camera, so they try to keep Mayaw away from the inner part so that he won't be able to film in the detail. And in the middle over there, the one who is on the wheelchair is the other leader. He's Napu, he's a singer. And there is another female activist, is her wife, Banai. We also saw her sing on the film. And that was exactly 100 days of their protest. And in a raining day, the police say this camp might cause some dangerous for the car or vehicle transportation, so they just they need to move them away. And you see over there, this one is the presidential palace, only 400 meters away. So that's why yesterday I say live stream is also a part of indigenous cinema because since Mayaw he don't use the camera holder, now he use his smartphone, and with the social media he can go more directly to arouse the attention for the public. And this one, which get 190,000 views,
which is a lot.
Yeah,
and it's been shared, as you see, over 1,000
times.
Okay. May I ask another short question?
Yeah, please.
Does the slogan "No one is an outsider" imply that Han people from mainland China will be accepted as part of a new Taiwan?
Yes, actually, I will explain the concept. No one is an outsider because for these three activists, Banai, Napu, and Mayaw, they call them Panama, like the island, Panama. The three leaders. For them, indigenous land issues is concerned to all the Taiwan population, not only indigenous peoples. So they create this slogan. But this slogan also caused some unsatisfaction to some indigenous activists, because they think this kind of concept is more like an environmental movement, not an indigenous movement. So actually they're occupied are sometimes not really accepted by certain indigenous activists, because they think they open too much for the others. But for them, if indigenous human rights cannot be understood by the wider public, it will delay the progress of the indigenous rights. So that's how they do in their camp. They this place is just nearby the presidential parliament, but in other road, not in the main boulevard, so that they become less visible for the authority, and is in the park. And this place is actually a metro station's entrance, just aside the park, and where they holding their teach-in. Here is the kitchen, and some places they occupied in the garden. They use a lot of symbol to explain indigenous history. When in Taiwan's history, indigenous has lost their land. And there are also some photos about the first demolition. So that I think there are two kinds of history. One is the main history of indigenous people, and the second history about their occupation movement. But both of them parallel a lot, because it's like reflection to the old history. Indigenous peoples are always relocated by the authorities. It's like an effect of mirror. And they create this boulevard Katagalan tribe. It's an imaginary community where whatever identity can participate in. So they are not saying they are, for example, Zhou tribe or Amis tribe. No, they are new tribe, which they have the shared value. And the shared value is that respect to the elders. So, for example, Banai, Mayaw, and Nabu, they are considered the elders. So they make decisions. And the younger persons, they do a lot of service for the elders, and also support them. And here are the temp and the other side of the metro station, kitchen, and here are one of the photos I took during their transitional justice class. They invite a lot of different scholars from different disciplines and different universities. They had held around 170 conference there. And Tricia had participated one.
I think Skaya too. I want to say this is actually a very powerful indigenous knowledge production, and inviting everyone to be part of it, talking about literally, they have novelists, they have law students, law professors from all around to talk. And they're entirely online. So you can go on to no one is outsider.tw and you can access all the lectures, the talks, mostly in Mandarin now.
Yeah. And also, Ba Nai, since she's a singer and dancer, so she teach the traditional dance and song. And Nabu, he is more like a storyteller in this tribe. Okay. And they have this tower which is yellow and right, no one is an outsider, and there was a moment became very fashionable while the famous singer or artist, they use this to support indigenous lands. Okay. So and then we come to Pilin Yapu. Pilin Yapu, the moment while I shoot him, he was in a Haga elementary school. It's a Han elementary school, and he and his son is the only two indigenous persons. But several years later, he returned to his tribe and to become the principal of that Atayal elementary. So he trying to adapt the concept of Gaga. Gaga is the principal to being an Atayal to his education. Here are the elders of his tribe, and he has developed the knowledge system of Atayal people in his education system to the elementary school students, like the spiritual culture, environmental wisdom, life skill, tribal history, geography, arts, music, literature, social organization, etc. And in his textbook for him to be a Atayal, he should have two knowledge. One is general knowledge from the mainstream society, and one is Atayal culture. Because if Atayal kids only learn their own culture, they will probably not have the chance to adopt themselves into the mainstream society. So his educational series, they take both education, and which make Atayal children have more confidence on their own culture, because in the elementary school they can learn with their elders how to hunt, how to do the weaving, and how their traditional knowledge about the plants and music, etc. And since they have self-confidence on their own culture, they have better performance on their mainstream course as well. So they actually, after this implementing of his Atayal's course theory, their elementary school students average are the best in that region. So which is very surprising, which shows that actually beforehand some people might say indigenous children are probably less clever than non-indigenous peoples, than Han people, but it's not the case. Actually, it's about the self-identity. If they have the confidence to their own culture, who they are, actually they can learn and perform as well. So his elementary school is the first indigenous experimental school, and which is become the sample of the other schools. And since the President Tsai also pay a lot of attention on indigenous styles education, so after his school has been renewed as Atayal school, the indigenous educational law has changed to let more elementary school to fix their own textbook, and they use a lot of skill from Pilin Yapu's school. Yeah. And then here on their Facebook, they share how the elders teach the children to make the instrument of hunting. And Siapu Sukanan, since she is a local nurse, so she pay a lot of attention on the house care, because for the Dao people, they think hospital is somewhere they have a lot of evil spirits, so they don't want to go to hospital. In this specific cultural thinking, for Siapu Sukanan, she think better to improve some house care service. And then it's in 2011, she has found a Yapu Sukanan Home Center. Here is her Facebook website. And in this health care center, they can invite Chinese medicine or Western medicine to come here to cure the Dao elders. And this is not only a hospital, they also doing the workshop for the indigenous elders. For example, like painting course for them to recall their memories, or doing some weaving or jewelry making. And they also ask for the donation from money, goods, and medical supplies. So it's become a multi-function center. But they're still facing a lot of problem, not having sustainable financial support for the moment. So for these three filmmakers, most of the time they don't make films. They're doing social engagements, and they all play a very important part in Taiwan's political changes. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you very much for a terrific talk. And we're a few minutes over time, so without further ado, I'd like to thank both Skaya and Tricia for coming here to our island and sharing with us the update. The update was fabulous. It's so encouraging, and congratulations on your film, and thank you so much.
Thank you.